questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. We get the latest on the Prince Andrew settlement. We will be hosting Fantasy Prime Minister's Question Time today with two former top MPs. And we end the show with a sit-down interview with Shadow Levelling Up Minister Alex Norris. First, it's the news with Rosie. Good afternoon, it is 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date today on GB News. Russia's envoy to the EU says he doesn't expect any escalation in the Ukrainian crisis in the coming weeks, while President Putin says he's open to continuing dialogue. This follows claims by Russia that they're withdrawing troops from the border. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warns there's no evidence of military de-escalation and says actually 60% of Russia's land combat power is currently stationed at Ukraine's border. Well, today, NATO defence ministers will be meeting in Brussels. The organisation's Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg, has warned European security is still at risk.
We have heard the signs from Moscow about readiness to continue diplomatic efforts. But so far, we have not seen any de-escalation on the ground. On the contrary, it appears that Russia continues the military build-up.
The Met Police has launched an investigation into allegations of cash for honours. In a statement recently published, they said it relates to media reports claiming offers of help were made to secure honours and citizenship for a Saudi national. Police officers have been liaising with the Prince of Wales charity, the Prince's Foundation, as part of their initial investigations. No arrests have been made. Prince Andrew is facing renewed calls to give up one of his last remaining major titles, Duke of York, after agreeing to settle the civil sex assault claim brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. The royal has already been stripped of his honorary military roles and his Royal Highness title. Prince Andrew says he regrets his association with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and has agreed to make a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity. Well, legal partner Alan Collins says it's actually a good outcome for both parties.
I think it sends a very clear message, particularly to victims and survivors who have possibly not come forward. But actually, if you do come forward and you do disclose the fact that you've been abused as a child, you will be taken seriously. It doesn't matter where you come from in society, you will be listened to.
Higher prices in clothing and rising costs of some household goods have helped drive a further rise in the cost of living. Inflation has risen by 5.5% in the 12 months to January of this year. That's a near 30-year high. Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, says inflation is outpacing the growth of wages, putting pressure on household budgets.
I think the government, in light of these cost of living numbers, is going to come under very, very serious pressure now to not go ahead with that national insurance increase, employers and employees' national insurance contributions in April.
Meanwhile, across the UK, house prices increased by more than 10% in the year to December. Official figures show the average UK house price rose to £275,000. Freddie Poser from Priced Out told us there aren't enough properties across the country.
Unfortunately, house prices have been continuing to skyrocket for years now, and the government isn't doing nearly enough to sort that out. So it means that more young people are going to be priced out of the market will remain completely inefficient, and it won't work for the average Briton.
At least 7 people have died after a Spanish trawler sank off the eastern coast of Canada yesterday. 3 crew members were rescued from a life raft in the Atlantic, suffering from severe hypothermia. Spain's Fisheries Ministry says the Villa de Piantao trawler launched a distress beacon at 4 a.m. on Tuesday. The vessel sank around 280 miles southeast of Newfoundland. The Met Office is warning 90-mile-per-hour winds brought by Storm Dudley could pose a danger to life. Amber warnings are in place across central and southern Scotland and the north of England. ScotRail has announced that some of its services will stop at 4 o'clock today for safety. Drinking 2 medium glasses of wine a day can take adults over their daily recommended sugar intake. The Alcohol Health Alliance UK looked at the calorific and the sugar content of 30 bottles of red, white, rosé, fruit and sparkling alcohols sold in the UK. Well, the research found that 2 glasses of wine can have more calories than a hamburger. The Alliance is calling for better labelling on bottles. Swindon Town Football Club is trying to find a 6-and-a-half-year-old boy called Joe who says he can't attend matches because his mum has no money for food. Well, Joe wrote the club a letter and he sent the star player Harry McCurdy 26p in the post. The club tweeted his note trying to get in touch with him, and now a crowdfunding page has been set up to try to raise money for Joe to go to a game. You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Gloria for the briefing.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, Parliament might be in recess, but politics never stops. It's Wednesday and we'll have our fantasy Prime Minister's questions. We're continuing on our tour around the former Red Wall constituencies to test the mood in those traditional Labour seats that turned Tory in 2019. Today, we're hearing from people in the Don Valley. And the latest in our Real Me series, the person behind the politician. Today is the turn of the Labour MP for Nottingham North, Alex Norris. Give me your political briefing, send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Before we get to all that, there was major breaking royal news yesterday as it announced that Prince Andrew had reached an out-of-court settlement with his accuser, Virginia Giuffre. The Prince did not admit liability and has always denied the allegations against him, but agreed to pay an undisclosed sum, reportedly as much as £12 million. Joining me now in the studio is the GB News Home Affairs and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, hi. Before we talk about Prince Andrew, there's been some further breaking news for the royals.
Yes, this centres on a foundation, a charity that is run in the name of Prince Charles, and it's a Cash for Honours investigation. It's been rumbling on for some time. You may remember a few years ago that Michael Fawcett, a long-time aide of Prince Charles, some 40 years in that job, stood down as chief executive of the Prince's Foundation over allegations that a Saudi businessman, Mahfouz bin Mahfouz, was given an award as CBC in 2016 because of donations, financial donations that he had made to the Prince's Foundation. Now, I should say that the press team for Prince Charles have always maintained that the Prince had no knowledge of what was being done at the foundation in terms of charitable donations, etc. But after Michael Fawcett stood down, there was an internal investigation looking at the practices and fundraising by the Prince's Foundation. That was passed to the Metropolitan Police, who've also been liaising with interested parties in this investigation. So Michael Fawcett, Mufaz bin Mufaz as well, and have decided now that they will launch a formal investigation into these allegations that awards, honours were handed out because of donations made to this Prince's Foundation. So clearly the Metropolitan Police feel that at this stage they have enough to warrant a formal investigation. They say that there have been no arrests and no interviews that have taken place under caution as yet, but clearly we are just in the beginning stages of the formal investigation. And very unwelcome news, of course, for the royal family, the fact that Prince Charles's foundation, a charity in his name, is being investigated in this manner in the Jubilee year for the Queen, where they want to try to avoid as much controversy as possible. As I say, we've got to add that Prince Charles's team deny that he had any knowledge of the way in which that foundation was being run and the donations that were being provided to that foundation.
Really interesting. Let's talk about Prince Andrew and the settlement. Were you surprised by the settlement, or did you expect it always to end like this? Yeah, not in the slightest. When we heard that Virginia Giuffre, his accuser, was launching this civil lawsuit in the US, and that a judge in the US had decided that it could go to court and it would go before a jury, it was always inevitable that it would be settled out of court. 98% of all of these civil cases in the US are settled before they ever get to court. And there's a reason for that. Clearly, when someone is making damaging allegations against another individual, whether that individual is a calculation that, look, I'm innocent, I want to defend myself, you've got to make a calculation. Is the defence of your name worth all of the heartache and the embarrassment for you and your family that such a lawsuit would bring? And clearly, I think the calculus here is on behalf of Prince Andrew's team is that we need to settle, we need to get rid of this particular lawsuit. As I say, in this Jubilee year, the last thing they wanted was for the Prince and others associated with Prince Andrew to be deposed, for all of those allegations to be aired in minute detail in an American court, and they would have been. So this saves that. It's now been settled. They've not disclosed the sum, various figures going around about $12 million, but no one really knows. But at least from our point of view and going forward, the substantial case as such now has been settled. Big question, but only about a minute to answer it. What does the future hold for Prince Andrew?
Well, there's lots of people saying that, he's finished now, he'll never be really part of the royal family in any meaningful way. I'm not convinced of that. The public and the press, they have short memories. Remember what people said about Prince Charles and Camilla at the time of Diana's death. He would never, ever, and she could never be queen, and look where we are now. So, yeah, in time, I'm sure things will ease off as far as Prince Andrew is concerned, and he will probably filter back into public life to some degree.
Really interesting. As ever, thank you, Mark White. Now, most Wednesdays, we'd be crossing live to the House of Commons at this time to listen to the Prime Minister answer questions from MPs. But Parliament's in recess, so we have a special edition, Fantasy PMQs. I'm joined by Joe Platt, former Labour MP and Shadow Cabinet Minister, and former Minister and Conservative MP, Anne Milton. Lovely to see you both, ladies. Hope you're both well.
Gloria.
Let me start with you, Joe. If you were still in Parliament today and the Prime Minister was ready to take questions, what questions would you be starting with, Joe Platt?
Gloria, it would have to be levelling up. It's what's most important to Lee, not just economically, but politically. I think it really matters. It really does hang in the balance what happens next in this area. I mean, I work for a local charity in the heart of Lee, And I think we know best what will make this town succeed in terms of investment. And I just think the current levelling up proposal from this government isn't going to cut it.
Anne, what about you? What would you be asking if you were still sitting on those green benches?
Well, I hate to be repetitive, but it would be on similar lines. I would specifically ask about apprenticeships. There's no doubt about it that, from my time as a Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships, apprenticeships are the best way to give somebody an opportunity to get into a job and get on stream to get a good career. In 2019, before the pandemic, the apprenticeship budget was overspent. We've seen a big drop in apprenticeships during the pandemic. But if we are successful and apprenticeships start up again, that budget is going to be insufficient. So I would be asking whether and how much money, more money, the government is going to put into apprenticeships.
And staying with you and staying with levelling up apprenticeships, were you surprised when Boris Johnson's new Chief of Staff vowed to restore a smaller state? Can you have a smaller state and level up and do the sort of things that both of you actually want to see?
I think that one of the key factors in levelling up, there are lots of them, so I'm not dismissing the need for investment in local areas and making high streets more attractive. But the most effective means of levelling up is through education. And actually, if you look at public health, look at the terrible inequalities in health that we currently have. Actually, education correlates best with public health outcomes than almost anything else. So it's all about education and training. And critically, for kids that maybe leave school at 16 or 18 without any qualifications, apprenticeships are a great way to get back on track. The government has launched a number of schemes which, in my view, aren't entirely necessary. There are some good schemes, always have been some quite good schemes. So let's concentrate on that and make sure that we get the money to where it can have an impact. And where it can have an impact on levelling up is through apprenticeships.
Joe, what do you think? Did you recoil when you read the new Chief of Staff, Cabinet Office Minister Steve Barclay's words on the need for a smaller state?
Yeah, I did, Gloria, because obviously it was only a few days before that the Communities Secretary was basically giving, sending out the messages for the need of, more powers to local leaders, so more devolved powers. I'm a huge advocate for meaningful and true devolution. It's leaders in these areas that know what's best for these areas. The people of Lee are not stupid. The things that they see now in their towns are the social issues, that have been thrust upon us. So these are the mental health issues. They are the drugs and the alcohol abuse. It's the homelessness, and these are visible on our streets. These are the things that we really need to tackle and we really need to get to grips with. And this recoiling of of a smaller state, I think, is just not going to cut it. We need more powers locally to tackle these issues.
Joe, sticking with you, but a point to both of you really. When you are outside of the Commons, and you were there until 2019, both of you, you do get a sense of perspective, which perhaps you don't get when you're right in the middle of things. Joe, how would you rate Labour's strengths and weaknesses right now, your own party's strengths and weaknesses?
So I think strengths, we are getting stronger. I think there's no doubt about that. I think what really matters, and again, you get a real sense of this on a local basis, is, it's what would Labour do, rather than just saying, what the Conservative government is doing is bad. we really need to set our stall out. And I think just an example of that recently has been in the energy crisis. What would we do differently is very, very different to what the Conservative government are proposing. And people are resonating with that. So I think, without doubt, I think Keir and his leadership is, it's getting stronger. And I think that will just get stronger with time as well.
And same point to you, strengths and weaknesses of the Conservative Party at the moment.
Well, you mustn't forget, Gloria, that I stood as an independent in 2019. So the Conservative Party wasn't very keen to have me. And so I'm now in the enviable position of being a floating voter. I think that the Prime Minister has been wounded, and I don't think that wound will heal, whatever happens next. I think that the cost of living crisis is going to be a real issue for this government, alongside levelling up. I think Keir Starmer is doing an okay job, but he's got a problem because he's up against a showman. And so it's always going to be difficult for him. The Conservative Party needs to get away from slogans and do something that makes a difference on the ground. Joe's point about devolution is a good one. But until people see on the streets something that feels different, then I think the Conservative government will struggle.
And it's so extraordinary to hear you describe yourself as a floating voter, but we are going
I am.
I know, it's fascinating. After the break, we will continue our discussion with my fantastic panel. And later in the show, we'll be in the former Red Wall seat of Don Valley, hearing from people there. Time for a short break first.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. We're going back to our panel, former Labour MP Joe Platt and former Conservative MP Anne Milton. Anne, you in your last answer, talked about the cost of living as what would potentially be the dominant political issue of this year. The budget is coming up in a few weeks' time. Do you think that we will see measures to alleviate some of the pressure on the cost of living? And are they really going to put up national insurance in a few weeks' time?
I think that the government's is going to be in a spot of bother with the budget. The cost of living, anything they do on the cost of living will be welcome, but it probably won't be enough for many people. I think that what I would like to see and what will happen, of course, are not necessarily the same thing. I would like to see a simplification of much of the funding around education. The danger for governments is that they always want to invent new shiny things, and new shiny things are often not necessary. So I think it will address it. I think that national insurance rise is going to be very tricky, but I would err on the side of the government sticking with it.
And Joe, same question to you. What would you like to see define that budget that's coming up on March the 23rd?
Oh, it's obviously very similar on the cost of living crisis, and you know, the sheer impact that this is having on people's lives. You know, it's horrific, and it's only going to get worse. So obviously more help to the person, but I think as well, just that sort of wider post-pandemic support that we need, and not just to certain sectors, but to individuals too. You know, there has been huge impacts. There's been huge impacts in mental health, in children's mental health in particular, and also to those that obviously have been affected by COVID. Again, it's something that I've personally gone through. So long COVID support is desperately needed as well. So I think just that post-pandemic support, which, you know, goes across the board rather than it just being basically directed at just business. I think it just needs that sort of wider view to help.
Cheers, Joe. Anne, parties have dominated politics, certainly the news, over the last few months. Is your sense that parties is a story that, when it comes to election time, it will be forgotten, or do you think this is something more defining than that?
I think that the damage will be lasting, but not to a degree that will necessarily affect the next general election, which is quite a long way off. Part of the reason for that is because the Prime Minister's behaviour has already been priced in by many people. And because it went on for so long, I think people are now fed up with it, to be absolutely honest. I think it has taken a chip off the Prime Minister, but I wouldn't overestimate the fact that the Prime Minister is capable of recovering and that people price it in. I stood in 2019 because I didn't think the Prime Minister was competent, honest, or had integrity. So I guess it's no news to me. But I think a lot of people knew that already. And they want a charismatic figure, and he does offer that. You can't knock that side of him. The key is for Keir Starmer, of course, to rise to the challenge that is offered. He's coming across well, as Joe said. I think it's a work in progress, but he's probably got to up his game a bit.
Anne, do you wish you were still in Parliament, preparing to ask a Prime Minister's question time? Do you miss it? No, I don't miss it, Gloria. But to some extent, you know, I'd spent 25 years working in the health service. You know, I was a bit of an accidental politician, to be honest, and I loved it when I was there. I still live in my patch, and you know, I see constituents, and the constituency side of it I do miss. But no, it was time for me to go. The Conservative Party didn't want me. We were going to go our separate ways. I think that was inevitable when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. So no, and I'm not somebody who looks backward. I look ahead, and I'm working with the further education sector. I work with Justine Greening on the purpose goals, you know, which is all about levelling up. These are the things that really matter to me, things I really care about. Joe, what makes, in your experience of Parliament, what makes a good Prime Minister's question?
Personally, I think giving a bit of a sarcastic connotation to the question, because, you know, sometimes you're really quite angry and you can't relay that in the House. So a hint of sarcasm to a question, I think is important. But I think, you know, where I've got the most traction is basically when you give the Prime Minister the heads up, you know, on a pertinent topic that you need an honest and divisive answer on. So giving the Prime Minister a heads up on what you're going to ask, you know, can prove, you know, can go down well.
Really interesting point. And finally to you, what makes a good Prime Minister's question?
Well, as former Deputy Chief Whip, I studied this at length. It's got to be short. The key is it's got to be very brief. The trouble is, if you have a long question, you give the opportunity to the Prime Minister to talk about all those other issues that you've raised, and also give him or her an opportunity to talk about the government's successes. So it's got to be brief. It's got to be to the point.
Love listening to you, and that is brilliant advice, and actually from you too, Joe, brilliant advice to any politicians who are watching and trying to formulate his PMQs. Keep it short, and if you want a real answer, maybe give them the heads up in advance. It's lovely to see you, Joe Platt and Anne Milton. Still thinking about Anne Milton being a floating voter. I can't quite get my head around that, but what a joy to see you both and listen to you both today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Lovely
Gloria.
to talk to you, Gloria. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
After the break, we have an exclusive interview with Alex Norris, Labour Shadow Levelling Up Minister, who opens up to me about the challenges of losing his father when he was just 2 years old. First, it's the news with Rosie. Good afternoon, it is 12:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia's envoy to the EU says he doesn't expect any escalation in the Ukrainian crisis in the coming weeks, while President Putin says he's open to continuing dialogue. Now, this follows claims by Russia that they're withdrawing troops from the border. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, though, warns there's no evidence of military de-escalation and says 60% of Russia's land combat power is stationed at Ukraine's border. Now, Prince Andrew is facing renewed calls to give up one of his last remaining major titles, the Duke of York, after agreeing to settle the civil sexual assault claim brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. The royal has already been stripped of his honorary military roles and His Royal Highness title. Prince Andrew says he regrets his association with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and has agreed to make a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity. The Met Police has launched an investigation into allegations of cash for honours. In a statement, they said it relates to media reports claiming offers of help were made to secure honours and citizenship for a Saudi national. Police officers have been liaising with the Prince of Wales charity, the Prince's Foundation, as part of their initial investigations. No arrests have been made. The cost of living has increased further, with inflation rising 5.5% in the 12 months to January 2022. That is reaching a near 30-year high. Higher prices in clothing, rising costs of some household goods and rent increases were key factors behind the rise. Children between the ages of 5 and 11 in Scotland are to be offered a COVID vaccination. Nicola Sturgeon's just made the announcement. Yesterday, Wales became the first country in the United Kingdom to announce it would be vaccinating children in the same age group. You're now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing with Gloria.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. This week we've been reporting from former Labour strongholds which switched to the Conservatives at the last general election. 2 years into Boris Johnson's government, we want to test the mood and voting intention of people on the ground. Joining me from Conisbrough in the former Labour stronghold of Don Valley is our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley. Anna, hi.
Good afternoon, Gloria. Yes, I'm here in a windy Conisbrough. As you can probably tell, my hair's blowing all around the place. I've been here. It's to the south of Doncaster, and it was a real Labour stronghold. It's been a traditional mining town. The colliery only shut down here in 1986, and from 1922 to 2019, it has always been red. But in those 2009 elections, Conservative Nick Fletcher got in as Conservative MP here. And the reasons around that, well, this area is a real place that wanted Brexit to be done. Over 66% of people here voted to leave, and they felt that Conservatives were the right party to get that done. And there was also concerns when I spoke to people here about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, and that was another reason that traditional Labours decided to turn blue. I spoke to people here in the town of Conisbrough. It's one of the areas that makes up Don Valley. The whole of Don Valley, it's got around 75,300 constituents, and Labour's Caroline Flint lost to Nick Fletcher with 3,630 votes in favour of the Conservatives. So I've been on the ground speaking to people here in Conisbrough about how they voted in the last election and if their vote would change, if they'd stay Labour, if they'd go on Conservative, if they'd switch. This is what people had to say to me.
And why was that?
Well, because I thought the others were making a bad job of it and these would make a good job.
And how do you think they've got on?
Oh, I think they haven't done very well at all.
And why is that?
Well, for a start, they've not done half what they said they were going to do, and this pandemic's really shown them up, hasn't it?
And what would you do for the next election?
To be honest, I don't think I'd go at all.
And why is that?
Because I can't see any of them doing what they say they do.
Labour, love.
And why was that?
Because I believe Labour's a lot better than what we've got in now.
So you wouldn't change your vote this time?
Definitely not.
Voted for Labour, like.
And why was that?
Well, because it's been Labour majority round our way, like, you know. I was going to just shut my eyes and put a cross at first, because I don't think there's much difference, like, you know.
The ones who are in charge I don't think they want change, to be honest. They want the system to stay this way.
I was brought up Labour and I'll always be Labour, love. But I don't think any of them are much good, what are in. Because they ought to have us in. They ought to have all ladies in. And that's it. So, no. But we can't do any worse, can we, love, than what we've got.
What do you think to Boris Johnson?
Not much. Not much. Well, never thought Conservatives any good, so that's it, love.
I didn't vote this time. I've always voted Labour, but I wasn't sure what to do this time.
And if it came to it again for the next election, what would it be?
It would be Conservative.
And what's the reason for that?
I haven't got a lot of faith in the Labour Party at the moment. Not that I've got a lot of faith in the Conservative Party, but I don't think he's the right person
Keir
for the job.
Keir Starmer?
Yeah.
So if it was a different Labour leader, might you be more interested?
Yes, I would.
Just preferred Conservative this time to Labour.
And do you think in the next election it'll be the same way?
Probably not, probably Labour.
And why do you think you've changed your mind? Have Conservative not done what you wanted?
Well, I think they've done a good job in some respects, but then they've met rules up and don't stick to them themselves.
So a real mix of views there. Some still die-hard Labour supporters that saying they'll stick Labour. The families have always been Labour. It's a traditional mining town. That's how they're going to stick. Some people going Conservative, regretting the decision, potentially with Partygate and other issues around COVID fitting into that. But in terms of levelling up as well, I spoke to people here in this town about if they'd seen it, and they said no, they felt it was a buzzword that was used by politicians, and that they had seen investment in the nearby town of Doncaster, which is currently going for city status, but they'd not actually seen any money being put into the town here. It's a high street that is filled with empty shops, and they wanted more money pumping into the economy for local jobs here and to get the shopping market going and improve the high street. Other people also mentioned crime as well, and they said they wanted more investment putting into policing around here to combat crime. So in the next election, let's see, who will they vote for? Time will tell.
Anna, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for bringing us those voices. Thank you. Now it's time for my series of special interviews with MPs where we go behind the politics and get to know the real person. Today it's the turn of the Labour MP for Nottingham North, Alex Norris, who talks about the challenges of losing his dad when he was 2.
Alex Norris, a little bit of history. You were one of the first IVF babies.
Yeah, 1984. Well, 1983 it would have been. That's how I was conceived, very early days. So mine, like many people, is an NHS story, and that's how I came to be.
Gosh, it must have been incredible for your parents to go through that.
Yeah, well, it was because of my father's illness. My dad had blood cancer over a period of 6 years, and this was in the middle of it. So in order for them to conceive, they wanted to have a second child with my big sister. So they went through this relatively novel process, and I came out the other end of it. So again, a wonderful thing for us, something that wouldn't have happened in times before, and so something I feel a real profound connection to.
You mentioned your dad's blood cancer. You lose your dad when you're 2. Do you have memories of your dad?
Yeah, fleeting, kind of like photos in your head of little moments, but very small. So it was just before my 3rd birthday. So obviously you keep the memories alive more by stories with your family and whatnot. But it's something that, it was 35 years, a couple of days ago. And that's the sort of thing that kind of stays with you a bit.
What did your mum and dad do?
So they, at the time of my birth, they ran a pub. My dad was from Sunderland. He'd run away to sea in his late teens. Mum was a dancer originally, danced in carnivals in Brazil, an incredible professional career in that sense. And then they met on a cruise ship where Mum was an entertainment officer, and then came off the ships. I was going to call it boats, and my mum would have put in a complaint to Ofcom. So they came off the ships then to run a pub, and then my dad was poorly, and that was the end of that process. After he passed away, they then sold the pub, and we moved back to Manchester with my grandparents.
Gosh. So your dad dies just before your 3rd birthday, and then your mum sells the pub. Just talk us through your earliest memories from that period.
And that was a hard time. Mum had 2 young kids. Her skills, which she trained for, had come ahead of her, perhaps her education at school. She's caught up on her GCSEs now, which she's very proud of, but didn't leave with very many O-levels. So she had to find work that she could do to raise 2 kids. So she went into childminding because that was something that you could take your kids to. And so my memories are watching Mum work very hard to keep a roof over our heads, to be aware that, you know, you don't want to be too much kind of like black and white footage about this stuff, but that things were challenging. We didn't have an awful lot of margin for error. We didn't have lots of money, and that we kind of had to pull together and to be together. And then watching her go to night school after working long days to build her skills and to do better at work, and that was the story of our life kind of changing. That's something I remember, and again, quite a profound formative experience for me from my childhood.
Your mum sounds amazing.
Yeah, she's tough, yeah. So she had to do, I'm very aware of the sacrifices she made for me and my sister. And then, you know, she loves what I do. I think so. I get a kick out of that. I feel like perhaps it was a decent investment. My sister's wonderful as well, you know, we're a great family. And so, you know, it was a very hard time, you know, and it's not now. I'm conscious of that. And the thing of having gone through that is that I'm not misty-eyed about it. You'd never want to go back to it, but also you don't want to forget it either. And that's very much why I chose kind of what I did with my career, because to help families like mine.
What do you feel that you went without that other kids seemed not to? Or perhaps she was so good at managing things that she managed to disguise any of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're aware of difference, whether it's holidays, whether it's clothes, but we valued other things, you know, and I was aware, because the thing you're most aware you didn't have was 2 parents. But the way in which we were together, you know, our house was a house full of love. The 3 of us were very close, we still are. So as a result, you know, you didn't feel like you missed stuff in that way. So, you know, and those sorts of things outweigh obviously the material things, which is why I've never been excited about the material stuff, obviously, then through the rest of my life.
Some people who lose parents early on, there are longer term repercussions to that. People always say kids are very resilient, yeah. But actually, as you grow older, then losing a parent very young, do you think it's affected you psychologically long term?
Well, you know, I think in the sense that you carry it with you, of course it must do. I was very young.
Yes.
So perhaps for my sister who was older, it would have a more, you know, a more direct impact. You know, you're aware, as you say, of a child of that difference, and it's natural to feel a sort of sense of a gap and loss. But there's definitely a phenomenon that certainly as boys get to the age of their fathers, which I'm about now, that can be a moment of kind of reflection or whatever. So the honest thing is I don't really know, because you don't always recognise it in yourself. But there's no way that something like that happens and it doesn't leave a kind of an indelible impact, I think.
That's extraordinary. So your dad, when he died, was about...
You'd be pretty much exactly the same age as I am now, yeah.
How old?
37. So you think, yeah, as you say, it's hard not to then see parallels, you know, in your own life, and then I feel very young. I feel like my life is in front of me. So to think that would be that, then that of course gives you an incredible sense of sadness.
Now, Alex, whatever your mum does or your teachers, turns out you're a really clever child. You're a clever child.
Yeah.
And when does this become apparent? We'll go on to explore why I'm asking you this very lovely question about you being a really clever kid in a second, but when does it transpire that you're really smart?
Well, I was always good at school, and, you know, it was Mum instilled that thing in us that we were going to go to school, we were going to work hard. You know, ours wasn't a family where people had gone to university, but that we could have those opportunities if we worked hard, and that education would be our way of building the best lives for ourselves. And obviously we saw that replicated because that's what she was doing at night school. So, and then when you're younger, you just, you know you've got a flair for certain things, and that things are going well, and that your teachers, you know, are positive about your parents, even and want perhaps you to push you for different opportunities. So that's, you know, you sort of started to get that sense.
So, did you sit an exam? Because you end up at private school at the age of
11. Yeah.
So you're at your primary state school, your local primary state school, and then what happens?
Yeah. So so mine is, where I'm from, was atypical in the sense that we still have the 11+. So we were used to taking exams, and then as part of that kind of circuit almost of exams, the school said, why don't you sit this exam for the private school, Manchester Grammar School? So I did, and there was 2 parts, and you get through the first part, but most people do. And then you get a call after the second part saying, well, actually, we want to offer you a place. And it was an academic exercise in the sense we couldn't afford to go. And then they said, but you can't afford to go, so you won't have to pay. So we've got free place, free everything. And then so suddenly you realise, actually, you are going to this school, which is very different to where you expected to go.
What's it like when you turn up there on your first day? Do they provide a uniform for you? Is it a posher uniform? No, that's the sort of standard.
It's still Manchester. Yeah. I don't want to start giving like Harry Potter vibes out of it. That was first day at Parliament rather than first day at school. But when I say the school paid for everything, they paid for everything: travel, uniforms, all in basically the desire to try to make you not feel different. And actually, that was done very well.
That's good.
Of our year, there were 30 of 200 that would be in my situation. I couldn't tell you who they were. We would all know who we were, but I couldn't. So the difference was felt more in the, everyone knows French. I'd never spoken a word of French in my life, and suddenly all these children at 11 could do it. So the differences became quite obvious that perhaps the academic backgrounds were much stronger. But as a child, you were just one of the crowd, really.
Did you board?
No, it's a day school.
Day school. I don't know if it is possible to sort of compare the quality of education or class size at all. Does anything strike you as when you went from your primary school to posh school? What struck you most?
Well, you can obviously, I spend a lot of time at schools now, so you do compare. And demographically, it's very different. Certainly, in ethnicity-wise, it was lots of white children, frankly, than we see in my community. So that's an obvious difference. But again, it's a school with uniforms, but with older traditions on the wall and all that sort of stuff. School started in 1515 and all that. There'd be a few more kind of arcane customs, founders' days and things like that.
What's that?
Well, special days that you go to the cathedral to talk, to celebrate the foundation of the school. I mean, I know all sort of places have rituals. So it was just, it wasn't, it was hard to say it wasn't that different because I didn't have anything to compare it to. But the number one thing is, from straight away, there was an expectation you're going to do really well. And that, you're going to work really hard and you're almost on a conveyor belt, and that you yourself will have to jump off the side if you don't want that conveyor belt to take you to somewhere really good. And you can't help but think, looking back, why isn't that the case for every child? And how different could that be for everyone if that was the case for everybody?
There'll be some people watching this, because, to be honest, I'm thinking it a bit, because of that last Labour government, the Blair government, it scrapped the assisted place. Yeah. Is that sort of what we're talking about? Yeah, which was to give working class kids, a few, admittedly, the chance to go to private school. And there'll be some people thinking, why did they scrap that? Look at Alex. He benefited from that.
Yeah, the school straight away started fundraising and replaced it pretty quickly. So I don't think it was a dead loss. They may right to be saying differently, but that was my recollection. But it shouldn't be by exception. The idea that for a number of children chosen at the age of 11 based on their academic ability, they should be exposed to better opportunities than those who weren't, that to me is just basically wrong. And our answers have to be, how do we raise up everybody rather than, how do we pick out a few and give them better chances? That just seems fundamentally unfair to me.
When I was at school, I often didn't go to school on things like wear your own clothes to school day, because obviously, not obviously, but I went to comp, but we were poor. And now I look at what schools do today. So it's not just the occasional wear your own clothes to school day. It's like book day, it's proms, it's like things that I thought, when I see this, I thought, God, it wouldn't have been one day a year. I had to miss quite a few days a year. Does any of that worry you? Because it sounds like your private school made sure that nobody knew.
Yeah, I look at some of the days now on social media, I don't relate to them at all. I know many of them are quite new anyway, this is 20 years ago, but actually in reality, that wasn't our experience at all. You wore the same school uniforms through the school, and then you wore basic Marks and Spencer suits or I did anyway, when you got into sixth form. So yeah, that.
So there was never. Did you have to do like posh things like proms and stuff at private school? Do they have things like that you wouldn't have had at comprehensive school then, or are there things? No.
We had something in sixth form, but not.
Yeah,
but at that point, you didn't really care about much.
Yeah.
The difference was in holidays. You were aware that other people did, had foreign holidays, for example.
And you didn't.
And that wasn't the sort of thing that we did. Every other year you'd do something. So, but again, those you were aware of them, but weren't something that was a constant feature or made you feel that actually, that less about yourself as a result.
It's really interesting to talk about your background. I just want to do one question about politics, because I know your seat a bit, and there's this perception that all towns are red well and all cities are sort of urban graduate Labour. But actually, of all the Nottingham seats, you have what we'll term a significant white working class element in that seat. Tell me how that... Does it feel different from the other Nottingham seats? Why does it matter to you?
Yeah, I mean, mine is, I would say, a town seat, but within a city. We've got Bulwell, it's a market town, and then the rest of the constituency radiates off that. So a lot of the things that characterise the 2019 election, but also the ones before, we've got that. The thing that probably stopped us from being different, I say I border the red wall, mainly so I can sleep at night. Or sometimes say I'm in the red wall when I want to be able to speak with expertise. So it's possibly a fungible boundary there. But we've got all the benefits of a big city in the sense that we've got really, really good public transport. We do have connections to big employers. So whilst we don't have all the features that make people say, well, actually, this has not worked for us. We've voted a certain way for a long time. We're not going to do it again. So that I think is the difference for us.
I think it's still quite a big journey to win back those voters that left the Labour Party at the last election.
Yeah.
How far along the road are you?
Well, I think we've made considerable strides. It's sometimes hard in politics to know whether you're doing better or the other side are doing worse, because they definitely are. And that can mask things. You can't live and die by polling, because it can give you reasons to not change. 2019 was awful. To be told by my neighbours that they didn't think that we spoke for them anymore, that they looked at us particularly at a national level and thought that we didn't love our country, that we didn't value work strongly enough. Those are really hard messages to hear. They weren't unique to 2019. We'd been hearing them for a while and perhaps we hadn't listened. So it is better now. We have those conversations on the door and people recognise change. They want to know that we're for real though, because it's been 2 years and that's it. They want to see from us that we're interested in talking about their issues rather than just the issues that we're particularly passionate about. And they want to know, just like everybody else, that they're going to be better off with us and that this isn't some sort of, crusade that's not relevant to their life. And it's getting there. It isn't there yet. And, and until we land that, certainly with people in communities like mine, we won't make the progress that we want to.
Alex Norris, fascinating life story and interesting on politics too. Thank you very much indeed, Alex Norris.
You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I'm back every Monday to Thursday at noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, but for now, it is time for your weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. 2 named storms in the next 48 hours are likely to bring disruption to many and dangerous wind speeds to some. Storm Dudley later today and then Storm Eunice on Friday. The rain ahead of Dudley already pushing in across much of the UK. Bands of heavy and persistent rain pushing eastwards across northern and western England, Wales, and for a time Scotland and Northern Ireland. That falling as hill snow for the north of Scotland, but with southwesterly winds picking up strength elsewhere, it's actually a very mild day for the vast majority, 15, 16 Celsius possible in the south. Then the spells of rain move through, but the wind really picks up through the evening. 70 and in some places 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. The worst hit areas, Central Belt, southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland and northern England. Risk of disruption from those wind speeds and risk of some damaging wind speeds in some places. It's windy everywhere through the night and there'll be blustery showers, longer spells of rain and hill snow for northern Scotland. And it's going to be cold in the north, but milder further south as we start off the day tomorrow. A bright start, and although it's a windy day again tomorrow, the winds will be coming down following the overnight strengths. And for many, it's a day of sunny spells and blustery showers. Again, hill snow for Scotland. Showers hit and miss elsewhere, with some brighter interludes in between. 11 Celsius in the south for the likes of Southampton and Plymouth. I think 5 to 8 Celsius for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Into Thursday evening then, clear at first. The winds drop away at first.